A few things before I begin. I'm going to be talking about files, file types, organizing files, and how to use software. Still, I don't know anything about computers. You should realize that anything I suggest can be done a different way, and if something else works for you, go ahead. While making this, I wondered whether I wanted to make a purely technical guide giving only practical advice, or if I wanted to offer some very limited theoretical background for why the practical aspects I'm mentioning are relevant. I will be giving some theoretical information because while I do want this to be precise and efficient, I also want to offer some explanation for what I'm doing, even if it's very basic. These explanations are going to be spread out throughout the video, hopefully giving context to whatever I'm showing. What do I mean when I say music library? Essentially what I mean is a kind of Spotify that you set up completely on your own. What I understand as a library is some kind of system in which things are ordered in a way that makes them easily accessible and manageable. The whole point here is to own the music you listen to yourself. But in collecting more and more music, if you don't put it into some kind of system, you're going to end up with chaos that won't let you use the stuff you've collected in the way you want to. A music library is going to help with that. Setting this up is going to take some time. For me, it's totally worth it, but that's up to you. It will definitely take more time than just searching up songs on a streaming platform and adding them to a playlist, just to make that clear. The benefits I see in building a music library are the following. For one, an independence from streaming services. I own the music, it's on my hard drive. Offline, online, here, there, now, later, doesn't matter. That also means being able to listen to music not available on streaming services. Another benefit is an independence from physical media. Physical media has its own value, but I don't want to depend on it. Better audio quality is another reason to do this. While I can't really prove it or sensibly argue for it, you just have to trust me that FLAC files from my own library sound better than anything streaming services offer. I also like the ability to transfer my music onto almost any device or medium. Once you have a music library set up, it's the easiest thing to sync it to your phone. I put music on my phone, iPod, PSP, PS Vita, Nintendo 3DS, I burn CDs, mini discs, and record tapes. Once I have the music integrated into a library, all these options become way simpler. You'll likely end up learning a bit about music, which I see as a benefit. When you stop just streaming music and have to deal with how to listen to it yourself, you're bound to learn things about how music is materialized. Bit rates, frequencies, file formats, metadata, etc. I'm glad to know more about all that stuff than I did before. The requirements depend on what you want to do with your music and how you collect it. In general, this is what I think you should have. For one, some kind of computer. To replicate the process in the way I'm going to suggest, you're going to need software only available for Windows. That doesn't mean it's impossible to do this on Mac and Linux, but it will just be a different process. Next, you're going to need some storage space. Music files take up storage, how much depends on you. You're also going to need to find time to set up and maintain this library. That's essentially all you need though. Personal preferences are going to change your requirements. I like to burn CDs for example, so I need blank CDs and a disk drive for that. I'm going to explain how I build a library with an example of adding a new song, so this should show the process from start to finish. How you get the actual music files is totally up to you, and it shouldn't make a difference for the library itself. I've ripped CDs, bought music off Bandcamp, tried making my own. There are a few possibilities. Another way to find music files is by using an application called SoulSeek. SoulSeek is a peer-to-peer file sharing app. People mostly use it for music. This isn't torrenting or downloading off internet servers per se, but downloading music directly from other people's hard drives. Because of this, SoulSeek depends on users making files available on their computers. Understandably, there is pressure from those sharing music on the app that others participate. It does keep the platform alive, but I'll be honest, I don't share music myself. On its website, SoulSeek writes the following rules. SoulSeek does not endorse or condone the sharing of copyrighted materials. You should only share and download files which you are legally allowed to or have otherwise received permission to share. I'm going to demonstrate how SoulSeek is used. The app has me log in with a username and password. I set these to anything I want. I'm not required to log in each time I open the app, and if I lose access to the account, I can just make a new one by inputting a new username and password. If I'm just downloading music, I don't need to hold on to that information. This is the user interface. When I have a song or album I'm looking for, I type it in here. Searching for music works by identifying file or folder names. It's a pretty sensitive searching function, so my inputs should be exact. I get a few results. If I don't, then there's nothing available under what I typed in. Now that I have some results, I can find the right one. Things to take into consideration here are file type, bitrate, and downloading speed. I sometimes pay attention to the folder names as well, because some users share information on the source of the files they're sharing. if it's ripped from a CD or vinyl record, stuff like that. I double-click the file and it will start downloading. Additionally, if I want to download the whole folder the file is in, I can do that too, and I can even browse through what other things that user has shared. I found some really good music this way. I can see the download folder under these settings and change it here to whatever I want. Under this tab, I can see what I've recently downloaded and the progress of my current downloads. Another way people get music files is by pulling them off CDs. For this, you're going to need a CD and a disk drive. I'll demonstrate how I do this on Windows using the built-in Windows Media Player. You can do this with the newer Media Player Windows has as well. On Mac, you can do this exact process with the built-in Music app. Once I put the CD in the disk drive, it will boot up. I can then see it listed in Windows Media Player. You can choose between settings concerning what file format you want the music files saved as and what bitrate they should have. I'll talk more about that later. I tell the program to rip the CD and it will save the songs to the music folder on my hard drive. Now I have some music files. It's time I explain a little more why I need some kind of system for them. I'm going to be suggesting building this library with some kind of music player in mind. I understand a music player as software that simplifies access to your music. Computers have a hard drive on which information is written. We are given access to the information written on this disk through some kind of interface. Files can be grouped together in folders, creating some kind of order. The problem is that the normal way we interact with these files, through the file browser, becomes impractical. The solution is some kind of software that accesses all these files and lets you manage and play them in a more convenient way, such as building playlists without having to make a folder with all the songs. If I knew more about Spotify, I'd say it's basically the same thing. If you're using it while you're online, it's accessing files on some server, and if you download the music, it's basically working the way I just explained, only it hides those files from you on your own device. Spotify even has a feature that lets you add files you saved yourself, essentially making it a music player in the way I mean it. So to be able to listen to, edit, and transfer music easier, we need to put it into some kind of system that's helpful for both the music player and for us, the users. You're likely going to be messing around in the files yourself every now and then, so it's helpful to make things simple to navigate. Again, if you have a reason to do it differently, do it. The file structure I suggest using is the following. I store all music in one folder. I'm on Windows, which sets up a music folder on its own. My folder goes inside of that one, since there are more music-related files I want grouped under music, but that aren't actual music files themselves. Then I suggest making separate folders if you collect separate file types. If you don't, skip this step. Now I make one folder for the album artist. If you want to be specific, a song may have a different artist from the artist who released the album the song is in. There are always going to be some cases that won't fit perfectly, this just makes the most sense to me. Inside that folder, I make a folder for the album. Its name will be the album's name followed by its release year. I put the music in this folder. Using this file structure makes your music files simple to navigate, and I found it work the best with the most music players. There's one more thing I have to mention. While I think it's important to keep this general structure the same for all my music, I also have one rule or one blueprint for how I name the folders and files. This might seem like overkill, but again, it depends on your preferences. Besides general simplicity, the main benefit that using one blueprint to name all your files has is that if you're building multiple libraries for different file types, things like playlists become interchangeable. I'll explain that more later. Now making all these folders and changing all the names of these files manually will become old fast. Thank God for the nerds out there who do this professionally and have come up with tools to help out. Before looking at MusicBee, we should take a quick look at what metadata is. MusicBee will index your music files based on the file's metadata. It's useful to have some idea what it is. A music file doesn't just contain the information that makes sounds, but also normal information called metadata. That includes the artist's name, the album title, the release date, the track title, the track number, the album art, yes, even the album art can be saved to a music file itself, and even lyrics. You can edit metadata in different ways with different programs. If someone were to use SoulSeek, they would likely find metadata already contained in the file they downloaded, since whoever shared them likely added some information themselves. In any case, that's all you really need to know about metadata for now. The best music player I have come across is MusicBee, which sadly is only available on Windows. Now, MusicBee can manage your files and function as a player for your music. Actually, it has a ton of functions, which is why I use and prefer it. First, I'm going to go through how to automatically organize your music files with it, then we'll look at the player functionalities. If you download MusicBee, I suggest downloading it from the official site instead of over the Microsoft Store. Reason being that downloading it from the Microsoft Store makes certain folders more difficult to access, which might cause headaches later on. Now that you have the app, it's time to create a library. This is basically a single system that remembers the file locations your music is saved in. Any music you add later on will be integrated. Since I plan on having multiple libraries to keep different file types apart, I'm going to name this in a way that lets me tell it apart from the second one. Next, you need to scan a folder for files to add. Choose the folder it should look through and select Add to Inbox. This doesn't add it to your library just yet. You can already look at each file's metadata in the inbox and edit it if you want. If none of the music you have has metadata, but you still want to automatically integrate your files into a music library or structure, MusicBee has an auto-tagging function. A lot of the times, auto-tagging mechanics won't work. This means you need to add the relevant information yourself. The issue now is that you need to know where to find the information you're looking for. The most immediate source is likely to look for the song or album you're adding on a streaming service of your choice. Spotify does carry information regarding release date, album name, track number, and so forth, but I found that often Spotify isn't the most reliable, and that much of the information on there, once you stop looking up very popular songs, becomes out of date or just wrong. When trying to categorize music, I often look at other music databases for help. Some relevant sites in that regard are Rate Your Music and Discogs. Most releases are added to the databases those services maintain, even showing publications that streaming services don't include and that may be interesting in your particular case. Album art can also be found this way. I've taken album art from these sites and have also screenshotted album covers that Spotify shows. Luckily though, MusicBee has a fairly reliable feature for searching for album covers right inside its application. The search it conducts uses the metadata entered to find a matching album cover, so make sure the information is in check before trying to search, otherwise you won't be getting any results. In MusicBee settings, there's a section under Tags too, which if enabled will have MusicBee embed the album art directly into the file or save it as a JPEG in the same folder as the file. I also recommend setting a limit as to how large the album art can be. Mine is set at 600 by 600 pixels, so that when the image is embedded into the actual music file, it won't really make the file size that much bigger. Again, if you don't care how accurately your music is tagged, that's fine, it's up to you, but a higher level of precision will result in the whole system working better. If you're interested in adding lyrics to your music files, MusicBee also has a feature for automatically adding these. This search will also be conducted in regard to the given metadata. However, lyric searching has been very unreliable for me, and I've ended up having to fix or replace lyrics so often that I just add them myself. The immediate source for lyrics is Genius. They have a lot of official lyrics published. I just copy and paste them into the respective track's lyric page. I found many lyrics that aren't available on Genius on Shazam for some reason, so that's another place to look. And if you get really desperate, try and find an upload of the song on YouTube. Often people add lyrics in the description or post them in the comments. Once your music has enough metadata for your needs, you can organize it. MusicBee will build file structures based on the metadata in the music files, essentially automating the process. Under Tools, you'll find the Organize Files option. This section lets you change the rule or blueprint according to which the files will be organized. I choose the location I want my music library in, and copy, and then paste the file path. Then I set parameters according to which the file will be stored. It should be placed in a folder that has the name of the album's artist. This way, multiple albums by the same artist are stored together. If the folder for the artist already exists, MusicBee just adds the album inside of that folder. The same counts for if the album folder already exists, the file just gets added inside of it. Inside the album artists folder, a folder should be made that carries the name of the album and its release year in parentheses. Next, I want the file renamed to carry only its track number and its title. Done. Because I save different file formats, both libraries have the same structure. When organizing different file types, all I need to do is change this folder, and the files will be added to the according file formats library. Now a quick look at the player. This is where you can build playlists. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can search all your songs, albums, and artists here, and this section is another overview of the artists in your library. MusicBee can be customized in a bunch of ways. You can go crazy with arranging the different panels and sections available, though the standard settings are totally fine. Additionally, you can download skins for the app. These just change the way it looks. MusicBee also lets you connect to your Last.fm account if that's your kind of thing. Features that I use a lot are the Convert Format tool, which will change the file format of your music, from FLAC to MP3 for example, and the Burn Disc tool, which is a really simple way to burn CDs. You just drop the songs in here and burn the disc. MusicBee also has a built-in visualizer feature, and there are additional visualizers you can download, though I'm not a huge fan of them. If you're interested in a cool visualizer, I'd recommend checking out Project M or the Milkdrop 3 visualizer. I'll add the respective links in the description. As a side note, if all your needs are met by this, you're done at this point. All that's left to do is maintain the library while you find more music. The rest of the things I'm going to talk about are more specific, only being relevant for certain features or in certain cases. Next, I want to show how I build a second library with a different file format than the first. I thought first I should explain real quick why I even do this. To see an actual nerd talk about this, I recommend looking at someone like Technology Connections. Now, when music is recorded digitally, it needs to be sampled in some kind of way. That means basically measuring, sampling, and recording frequencies at certain intervals. There are different ways, I think of them as different algorithms, or different codes, to store that information. The main distinction here is between lossy and lossless. A lossless recording will keep all the frequencies, leaving out nothing. The consequence is the increased file size because of the increased amount of information. A lossy recording will leave out certain frequencies and still sound pretty good at a reduced file size. Some examples here are WAV files, which are lossless, and MP3s, which are lossy. An MP3 will always leave out some frequencies, though it's debatable if those are even needed. It's difficult to find a final answer as to which frequencies you can actually hear and which ones you can't. An additional factor to digital recording is bitrate. When recording, the more samples you take in a certain amount of time will give you better audio quality, since it's more exact, leaving out less sound in between the samples. For example, MP3s can be recorded in different bit rates, meaning the amount of information saved will be different. The highest bit rate for MP3s is 320 kilobits per second as far as I know. Those sound awesome and still don't take up too much space, which is why I store my music in that format. But I've come to find that lossless file formats sound better. Even if I'm just imagining that, and some people will tell you that there's no audible difference, I enjoy it. Besides MP3s, I store music as FLACs. From what I understand, FLACs are apparently lossless, while still having reduced file sizes in comparison to something like a WAV file. I have no clue how that works, or if it even does. If you're curious, you can look it up. Among FLACs, there are two variants, 16-bit 44.1 kHz and 24-bit 96 kHz. The difference here is that the second one stores way more information, but as far as I read, a lot of that information can't even be heard by the human ear, so I stick with the first. If you plan on burning CDs, you should pay attention to the bitrate of your FLACs. CDs can only play music at 16 bits 44.1 kHz. Burning a 2496 FLAC on your CD will give you static. Trust me, I know. If you can only find 2496 FLACs of a song you like, you'll need to downsample it. Fubar 2000 does a great job of this, we'll talk about that later. Usually, I'll get all my music as FLACs, then fix all the metadata so it's accurate, then convert the files to 320 kilobit per second MP3s, and add that to my other library. Since the metadata was correct before I converted it, I shouldn't have to change it again. Something you should definitely look out for if you want to build a music library with anything other than MP3s is if your music player or the device you want to use will even play that file format. For example, as far as I know, Apple's Music app doesn't play FLAC files. They have their own proprietary lossless file format. This is mostly to show one of the benefits of going through this whole process. If you ever want to burn a CD and already have a library set up, it's really simple. Insert the empty CD into a disk drive and choose the Burn Disk tool in MusicBee. Then drag the music you want on the disk into the tab and make sure you pay attention to the file size and length, since the CD can only hold 700 megabytes or 80 minutes of music. Then hit burn. The music will be burned onto the CD in the order it is listed in MusicBee. My point is that if you had wanted to do this while your only access to music was through a streaming service, it would have been more difficult. By building a music library, you can enjoy about the same benefits as a streaming service offers while having access to additional features. If you have the same music in two libraries and want the same playlists in both places, here's a pretty simple way to transfer a playlist so you don't need to pick out all the songs one by one again. For this to work, the system inside your respective folders will need to be the same, otherwise you're better off just adding them one by one to a new playlist. This right here is a playlist file. I put a playlist together in MusicBee and exported it to have it. M3U is a pretty common playlist file type. If I open this file in a text editor, you can see how it works. The playlist file saves the file paths of the different songs in the playlist. When you play the playlist, it will choose only these songs from your library, and you don't need multiple copies of the same file for different playlists, since as many playlists as you want can access the one file's location. One of the main benefits of using a general rule for organizing your files becomes obvious here. If the files are stored the same way in both libraries, this part here of the file path will be the same. The only real difference will be the primary folder the music is saved in and the file's extension. There's a way to change these all at once, which will let you copy the playlist to another library as long as you have the same songs in both libraries. Export the playlist you want to transfer as an M3U through MusicBee. You will need a text editor. I recommend Notepad++. Open the playlist file and you should see all the file locations of your songs listed. If you separated your file formats into two different folders, you'll need to change that location for all the files, and will have to edit the file extension. Open the replacement menu, pressing Ctrl and H, and enter the name for the main folder your songs are in and replace it with the one you want the playlist to access. Then enter the file extension and replace it for all the songs. Save your changes and import the playlist into your second library. If it worked, your playlist should be transferred. If not, you can always locate the files that were stored differently. MusicBee has a pretty good feature for that. Foobar 2000 is another music player, essentially an alternative to MusicBee. I've known about Foobar for a while, but I never really understood its capabilities until recently. If you're confused as to what the point of it is and how to use it, look into it a little more and you might find it's actually a great piece of software. I'll link the exact YouTube videos that showed me what the app can be used for. What's great about Foobar to me is that while you can customize MusicBee pretty extensively, Foobar just seems fundamentally more malleable. I used the customizations showed in this video, and it makes the interface look like this. The cool part is that since I already have a music library set up, Foobar can access the same file structure and will be updated automatically when I add something new. While MusicBee isn't available on Mac, Foobar 2000 and SoulSeek are. Still, the situation is a little bit different for Mac users. Again, how you go about this on Mac is entirely up to you and can definitely be done differently. However, I would suggest using the built-in music application. I don't regularly use a Mac, but from what I can tell, when you add music files to the music app, it automatically sorts them based on metadata into a clear file structure. The trade-off is that the built-in music app doesn't play all file types. For example, if you want to build a collection of FLAC files, it may not work for you. I would consider Foobar 2000 in that case. And again, how you get your music is up to you. Everything I said regarding that earlier applies to both Windows and Mac. Now we'll look at Apple Music on Mac and iTunes on Windows. Once I have my music files, I just drag them into the Music app. The next thing to do is to sort out the metadata. Do this only as much as you need it. I like to add as much information as possible. With all the metadata added, you can browse the music you've saved easily through the app, group it together, and play it however you like. Sharing or copying the files is possible through the Music app as well, just by dragging and clicking. But if you ever need to access the files themselves in a file browser, you can find them here. Next, I'm going to show how I use the iTunes app on Windows. iTunes runs slowly on my cheap old laptop, so I don't listen to music through it, I just use it to transfer music onto my iPhone. Whenever I have a few new songs in my library on MusicBee, I drag them directly from MusicBee into iTunes. Most metadata should stay, sometimes album covers don't load, I add them myself in that case. That's basically it, the rest is all the same. This should be the same process for the Music app on Mac and iTunes on Windows. If you have a playlist you want to transfer to your iPhone on MusicBee, you can export it as an M3U file and import it into iTunes. Make sure you put the music itself into the app first. Then plug your phone into your computer and transfer the music you want. Technically, you can just load the songs into your iPhone Files app, but again, that's kind of inconvenient to use. This way, you can listen to music straight through the Apple Music app on your iPhone. Remember that transferring this music to your iPhone will copy the files onto it and take up storage space. Transferring music to an iPod works the same way, except you drag and drop music into the iPod's library. If you have an Android, then congrats, things are even simpler. Since Android doesn't hide the actual file structure from you, unlike Apple, which just paints an SQL database to look like a file manager, you can just drag and drop your music onto your phone like you would with any other storage device. Music players on Android should be countless. As far as I'm aware, you should even be able to download Apple Music on an Android. I recommend using the mobile version of Foobar 2000 though. It doesn't look as flashy as some of the other options out there, but it works perfectly. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the general idea is this. Save your music in one location on your phone and tell Foobar to scan that folder for music. I haven't looked into how to add playlists since I've kind of stopped listening to music on my phone.